All right, welcome folks. Welcome to session 8 in our series on Google Classroom features to monitor progress and provide feedback in the secondary classroom. My name is Tom Driscoll from EdTechTeacher. We're actually running these in partnership with DESE and Google for EDU. So we ran a series of them over the summer. A lot of teachers expressed interest in keeping them going and having follow-up sessions. So we actually just launched a new series that's going to go through the fall and the winter. So more on that in a second. All of the slides for this session can be found at that bit.ly address. So if you type in bit.ly/EdTechTeacher8, that will get you to the slides that go with this presentation. So a little quick background. Again, my name is Tom Driscoll. If you've done some of our EdTechTeacher webinars or workshops before, welcome. We actually just had our first live event in a while on Monday at Bentley. So we had about 150 teachers from the Massachusetts region joining us for a live event, but we also do a lot of work like this, such as this free webinar series. My contact information is there if you ever want to reach out on social media or check out some of the writing on my website. And for my background in education, so I'm a full-time instructor for EdTechTeacher now. Prior to that, I've been working for EdTechTeacher for years, but I also worked as a digital learning director for a regional school district in Rhode Island. Before that, I was a high school social studies teacher for 8 years. So my experience with Google goes back before there was Google Classroom, before it even existed. So it was kind of like, what is a Google Doc? And then once we figured out Google Docs, like, all right, what are these Chromebook things? And so I kind of went through the whole process from start to finish. So what I'm going to do today is really share what are some best practices of using Google Classroom for that back and forth feedback, student submissions, starting out with some of the core features, but then we'll drift into some of the other ones as well. So before we dive right into that, though, I did want to share with you guys that the website that has the upcoming sessions. So what I'll do is back out a second. So on this website here, bit.ly/EdTechTeacher, right? So that's actually going to bring you to, I'll share that again towards the end of the session. This is what the website looks like. So if you want to sign up for future sessions, we're doing Google Classroom feedback today, but we have a ton of them coming up on all types of apps like Docs, Slides, Sheets, and then going a little bit more into student diversity, addressing all students' needs, and then into more instructional models like station rotations or flipped instruction, digital portfolios, and that goes all the way through February. So if you wanted to sign up, you can actually sign up for as many as you want all in one shot, which some of you guys may have done already. And also, I'm sure a lot of you guys are watching the recording of this. So all of these sessions, whether or not you can make it live or not, are going to be shared out with all the participants. So I understand there's a lot of stuff going on at 3:30 in the afternoon. Some of these are actually, all of these are at 3:30. So if you know that you can't make it, but you still want to get access to these videos, feel free to sign up and then we can provide those to you. All right, so as far as the actual session, so a little bit more in-depth overview. So what we're going to do is talk a bit about the different ways that you can first monitor student progress, but also provide students with timely, targeted feedback. And there's a few basic ways to do it within the platform. And over the past few years, Google's been layering in some more advanced features. So we're going to discuss all of those in some detail. We're also going to take a look at other ways that you can weave in audio and video student submissions and feedback. We're not going to go into a ton of tools, but we are going to focus on a few that teachers have been loving the past few years. One of them kind of came out of nowhere as far as the audio sense. We'll get to that a little bit later, but that's an add-on that works really well with Google. So we'll get a little bit more into the audio and video towards the end of the session. All right, so the 3 parts of the session, we're going to start with the student side of things. So if you're conducting a secondary classroom and you want students to just demonstrate their thinking or just submitting assignments, there are several ways to do that. Each variation of that has different pros and cons, and we'll kind of go through some of those. The second part, though, is once it's submitted and once they do something in Google Classroom, that's just kind of the start, right? From an instructional standpoint, how do you then give students feedback, right? And I actually think that, when I first started teaching, that was one of the areas that I had to improve on the most at the beginning. I provided a ton of instruction, I gave a lot of assignments, but I don't think I had enough. Like if I took that slice, the amount of time that I spent on each part of teaching, I didn't spend enough time on the feedback part at the beginning. I was so caught up in the instruction that I wasn't giving kids enough feedback. So it took me a while to realize this, and frankly, until Google Classroom came out, it was kind of hard logistically, but I started to really focus more on, am I giving kids good, high quality feedback that's targeted, that's actionable, as opposed to spending all my time just creating like fancy slideshows and all of this instructional material, because again, that's only half the battle. And then last, again, I mentioned we're going to talk about audio and video for students. All right, so actually throughout these, you're going to see these awesome Bitmojis of my colleague Avra. She helped make these slides, so that's why you see that there. She's running the elementary session right now, so shout out to Avra of EdTechTeacher. So student submissions to Google Classroom. So first off, this is the most basic way to do it. So I'm going to go over this relatively quickly because a lot of you guys have probably done this before. But this is the idea of students going in, adding or creating a student artifact, right? So you can create these to a variety of different materials or assignment types. But what I like about the add or create is that it gives them a little bit more opportunity to do creative work. So we didn't do the make a copy of each slide type process because we feel like most teachers have already done that. But I feel like one thing that does is it makes things efficient, but it locks them into a very specific way that they can submit it. So I think as students get more comfortable with using Google Classroom, we definitely suggested it to teacher of giving them more choice over the modalities of how they demonstrate understanding. So having them create something new, or even if it's in another app, like say, for instance, you using Canva for education to do some visuals or infographics, or you're doing an Adobe Spark video, and that's the way that they demonstrate their understanding. Having them add the direct link to that web application is another great way for them to demonstrate their understanding. So if you wanted to facilitate more of a quick formative check or a class discussion, I actually suggest the easiest way is to just do a class question. A lot of people jump right to a Google form where I don't think you necessarily need to do that, right? So a lot of times in my classes, social studies is very discussion based, but I'm sure in every class, there's some type of academic discourse or dialogue, or there should be. So how can you foster that and engage them in dialogue throughout the class? The other nice thing about it is it's kind of like that walled garden, right? So you can kind of control who can reply to each other if you even have that on. So there's a few things that you can adjust, and it's just quick. It's just a quick, easy way to see what students are thinking in that class comment section. So what I want to point out, though, is the adjustments that you can make, because sometimes teachers can overlook this if they create it fast. And that's the bottom right there. If you see on the screen, it says students can reply to each other, students can edit, answer. Typically, my suggestion is to turn both of those off at the beginning. And then as students are more comfortable with the platform and you go over some digital citizenship concepts, I think that makes more sense to turn on. So especially if you want kids to actually respond to each other through some type of dialogue. The other thing I suggest too, and this again took me a while to really hone in on, but providing sentence stems and specific instruction on how to engage in a conversation digitally is really important. A lot of kids, and I know it's kind of a tired saying, like the whole now more than everything, but let's be honest, like a lot of kids are struggling right now with having conversations with each other, whether it's in person or online, because of the impact of the last couple of years. So I think providing more direct instruction for students and modeling it for them how to reply to each other in this space is really important. And then even editing an answer, that's something that you can adjust as you go through. All right, so the next part is the quiz feature. Most people are familiar with Google Forms. It's surprising how some people still haven't discovered that whole self-grading part of forms. So if you haven't done that, I highly suggest learning how to do that, because that's going to save you a tremendous amount of time. But when you do a quiz assignment, what it essentially does is it sets up a Google form so that all the settings are designed for you so that it can be a auto-graded quiz. And if you do the importing of grades, I know most teachers don't do that. They usually just go directly to their student information system. If that's where you record your stuff, that's perfectly fine. You don't necessarily have to, use the Google Classroom's grade feature, but that is available if you do a quiz assignment. You can actually see at the bottom there, I did put a screenshot of some of the settings there if you want to do that grade importing. And there's also feedback opportunities within forms. And I'm going to discuss that in a second. You can go really down the rabbit hole with that if you want to do like branching forms. And some teachers have even done like digital breakout rooms with Google Forms. And we're actually going to discuss that a little bit more in the Google Forms session a little bit later this year. But even without doing all of that crazy stuff, you can add in feedback within the wrong answers that kids take. So you can actually provide some instruction there. And I'll show you guys a quick screenshot of what that looks like. All right, so the to-do area for students. This is something that especially kids maybe entering 6th grade or 9th grade that haven't used some of these organizational strategies before, just giving them some time to go through and really understand like what is in this to-do area. What does it mean if something's assigned or missing or done? How is it organized? Just orienting them with that to-do bar is important. All right, so those are the ways kids can submit their stuff to you, right? So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward stuff. So now we're going to get into the heart of it, which is the feedback cycles that you can engage with in Google Classroom. So some of them are automated, right? So if you do the Google Forms, that's clearly a way that you can set that up. But there are other ways too that you can do it within Google Classroom or within the presentations and documents that they add into Google Classroom, right? So if they go in and add things, you can actually provide your feedback right within their resources. Okay, so the to review area for teachers, very similar to what you would see on the student side, but this is going to be organized a little bit differently. It's going to have the things that you've already reviewed and assessed. So if you've assigned something and graded it, it's going to be in that right tab. If it's on the left side, it's going to be the things that have been submitted that you still haven't been able to assign or check yet. Some teachers love looking at this. Some teachers are like, you know what, it's just, I don't want to have all of that information staring me in the face. It's completely up to you how you'd want to use it. But I do know some teachers that utilize that as a way to keep track of submissions. Now, when you go into a student's question or comment, especially if you do like the question assignments in Google Classroom, this is a really simple way to just go through and make some quick comments and feedback. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but really leverage this because it's a good way to have kids know that you're responding to them, that you're seeing some of their comments, and provide some really quick direct instruction. If you take a look at that bottom right there, you're going to see a little preview of what we're going to take a look at later. That's actually called moat. If you're not familiar with moat, it is a way that you can add audio feedback, right? So just a quick preview of that. In the comments section, you actually could click that button and leave some audio commentary for your students, which is very powerful. So that's a quick tip. And again, we'll come back to that in more detail later. On the bottom left, you'll see that the notification settings. If you haven't acquainted yourself with the notification settings, please do so because it is going to really help you tailor the way that you get notified through Gmail. If you have everything turned on, it's probably going to drive you nuts. So you're not going to want to have every single notification turned on in Gmail. But I also suggest you probably don't want everything turned off, right? So a lot of times teachers will keep the settings on for like late submissions or students have resubmitted an assignment. So you can tailor it so that those things show up in your email because those are things that you may want to see. But you do have the option to tailor what those notifications are. Okay, so when you add a reply, it's pretty straightforward. It's just like a threaded discussion. So just know that when questions are open where everybody can reply to each other, just know that when you respond, everyone else in the class can also see the teacher's response. All right, so just something to keep in mind. It's probably not going to matter, but just know that that's not like a private message to that student. If it's an open discussion forum where students can reply to each other, everybody in the class is going to see that. All right, so the next one is a little bit more, I wouldn't say complicated, but it's a little bit deeper dive into some of the features of Classroom, and that's utilizing and creating rubrics. So first, if you wanted to add a rubric to an assignment, there's going to be a section on the right side Now, that's been there for a while now, but surprisingly, a lot of folks, it just hasn't been something that's been on their radar, right? So if you haven't tried it yet, I really suggest kind of tinkering around with that. You have the ability to create new rubrics from scratch. If you have one that you use for, say, argumentative writing, or you have a claim evidence reasoning for science or whatever it might be, you can reuse existing rubrics. So that's something that as you click through, you have the ability to customize it. You use scoring. You can customize the score for each one. You can customize the title, the description, and even how many criterion you have, right? So typically people have 4 or 5, but you can adjust it to be whatever you want. So once you go through, it's going to look like this as you see the student submissions, right? So as you see a submission on the right side, you're going to see a rubric where you can go in and tag the rubric with whatever you think the score is for that particular assignment. So that's the teacher side. What does it look like for the kids? So when they log in, they would see their assignment that's been returned to them, and it will have not just the score in your comments, but it will have that rubric with, you know, the criteria, what you gave them as a score, and then any points that you assign to that. Then even beyond that, you can add some private comments along with the rubric through text, or if you have the moat extension installed, you could do that through the audio comments as well. So if you are a Google Sheets wizard, or you just like using Google Sheets instead of through the Google Classroom, you can actually use a template. There's a Google Classroom rubric template that you can use from this slide deck. So if you click on this link, if you just joined us recently, I can share out these slides towards the end. But if you click on it, it will open up a make a copy, force copy. You jump into this, and then this is just something that you could add to your drive. You could make a sample of it, but if you wanted to, you could just add whatever descriptions, titles, criteria, and then you have a copy of this for each student. You can customize it, share it with the student when they're done. I suggest not doing this for like small, quick formative assessments. It's just, it would take too much time. This is more for like, if you're doing like a project-based learning unit, or just some longer assignment that has multiple criteria that you want to give kids specific descriptions on. Something like this, a lot of times, is better than the built-in rubric in a Google Classroom. The reason why is because the one in Google Classroom, you don't have as much ability to kind of like tweak it and change it and customize it. But this is just kind of like a drag and drop way to do that. So feedback cycles with quizzes. So this is a little bit different. So this is the straightforward quiz settings. We don't need to go into too much detail, but if you haven't gone into the settings section before, the things that you can adjust are when they see the responses. So do you want them to see it right away, or do you want them to see it once you review all of them and send them back? The most obvious reason for holding on to them is that it helps prevent cheating. Right? Because if you immediately release all the grades, then maybe some kids get it early. They might send the questions over to somebody else. So really, there's no way to completely, lock down. I mean, you could use the Chromebook, locked quiz mode, but nothing's completely foolproof. But this will prevent that to some extent if you do the later. If it's just a quick formative check, though, to check for understanding, and you're not like grading it and putting it into a grade book, who cares? Like that's, if it's just a low stakes, quick formative check, just to immediately release it, let them see how they did, and then go from there. The other settings are missed questions, correct answers, and point values. So those are all things that if you wanted students to see that when they get their notification, that would be in the notification that they get. So the next thing you could do is you can add individual responses for students, right, that based on a wrong answer, right? So you can get feedback for correct answers and feedback for incorrect answers. So some folks haven't done those features before, so I do want to take a second to show you how you would actually do that. So I'm going to back out and just create, or just go to a quick form that I made. So what you can do is when you create a question, when you go down to the answer key, there's going to be a section where it says feedback for incorrect answers or correct answers. So for this one, like if they put Celtics for who's going to win the Super Bowl, my response was, they're an NBA team, you need to study a little more. And then I put a video of Larry Bird's top 10 moments, of course, and then a link to the Celtics website. So this is what I mean by giving a little bit more descriptive feedback through a Google form. So you can also put in things that if they get it correct, maybe you put some more advanced resources in there for them to check out. But it's just a quick way to not just do an assessment, but to really build in some instructional materials right within your assessment. So if I want to do that for another one, I would just click on it, and then I can edit what those feedback, what it would be for all the correct or incorrect answers. So you can kind of play around with that and see, what your preference is for customizing those responses. All right, so that's kind of basically the same as I just showed in that live demo. All right, so next is originality reports. I'm not sure if you guys have used this before, but it is a pretty useful tool for checking, one, if students missed citations. Students can run these originality reports themselves. And two, it can actually help you with determining if students were doing plagiarism. So if you want to learn more about it, I did put a link in the slide deck, and it goes through a little bit more of the features, right? So highlighting different external sources that students are pulling from if they are. And there's even a way that you can create a bank or a repository of past work within your domain. So this is something a lot of teachers don't realize. What that means is it will actually search through all the assignments that were submitted within your school district and check to see if it's the same as some other student has submitted, right? So it's not just checking against stuff out on the internet, it's checking internally as well. So it is a pretty powerful tool, and teachers that have used it have liked it. The only catch here is that to have the unlimited access, your school needs to have the Teaching and Learning Upgrade and Education Plus. A lot of districts actually do, though. A lot of teachers upgraded last year because you had more like recording options in Google Meet. So what I would suggest is checking with your administrator and finding out, or your IT team, just finding out if you do have access to the originality reports. If you do, just give it a shot. Try to run them. There's a tutorial here how to use originality reports. So if you wanted to play that, go through and see how it works. It's kind of an untapped resource at this point. So highly recommend checking it out. And if you don't have it as a district and you want to see if you can get like a pilot of it, I'm sure if you guys contacted whoever your rep is for Google for Education, they can hook you up with testing it out in your classes. All right. So next is actually a couple new features that are available in Google Docs. So a lot of folks didn't realize, but Google Docs actually pushed out a few updates over the summer and into the fall that are just kind of baked into the Google Docs platform. And it's not necessarily Google Classroom, right? But a lot of us have students submit Google Docs as their assignment submission within Google Classroom. So I think it makes sense to take a few minutes, because a lot of the features actually help with giving students feedback, right? So for those of you who do comments and tags and assignments and checklists and things like that, this is going to help quite a bit regarding student feedback right within a document. I can see this being huge for any class where you're giving kids feedback on writing or projects or research. This is going to help quite a bit. So I'm just going to start by showing this video, and then we'll pull back and I'll highlight some of the things that are demonstrated in these new features. so that was some of the features that are now baked into Google Docs. So I'll kind of go through what some of those were with you guys. So the first one that they showed was the checklist feature. You can see it in the graphic here. So this is built in now, where if you want to go in and click that check now, it's really good for collaboration or just students keeping track of work that they're doing in a project or just as part of a lesson. If you push out templates to kids, you could actually have a pre-built template with the checklists, make a copy for each student, and then they have that as part of their assignment. I can see this being extremely helpful for students that need some of that scaffolding, particularly maybe a sixth grade student that's all over the place and can't keep track of things. The other thing that we saw in that quick clip, and I'm not going to play the video again, but just a couple things that I saw. If you click the at button in Google Docs now, you can embed documents, you can tag people, and then from there, you can also assign tasks to them. So if you haven't done that before, that's another way that you can not only provide feedback, but say I go and I provide feedback, but I assign a task to a student. I could say, all right, this is a great thesis statement. However, you need to have stronger supporting evidence to make your case. I could not just add that, I would add assign. And then when the student finishes that, they could check that box off, and then I get a notification that they finished that as well. So all of that is now in Google Docs. If it's not yet in your district, sometimes they kind of do like a layered rollout and it doesn't all go at once. But if you haven't seen it yet, you should see it soon. They're also going to start integrating Google Meet within Google Docs. So you could actually launch a Meet and collaborate with another student, or maybe with a student, with a teacher and student within the Google document. So they're just trying to integrate things and make it more seamless across the different platforms. All right, so I did see something just pop into the chat. So 1 second. That's my Zoom controls. Okay, yes, Kelly. Yep. So checklist being helpful for students. Yeah. So executive functioning. I know a lot of students that I had different accommodations where providing specific checklists was listed as one of the strategies to help them. So this can definitely be a way to help address that. All right. So next is if you wanted a template to go off of. So that is on this slide here. I don't know why I can't go full screen. 1 second. So if you click on that, it'll bring you to a sample to-do list. If you wanted to see what a template looks like, make a copy of it, check it out. It's pretty simple to do, but it still might be worth making a quick template and sharing out with kids, maybe at the beginning of an assignment. All right, so we're going to get into our last topic now. This one's a little bit more involved, but I want to spend a good 10, 15 minutes going over this because it is a little bit more complicated, but I think very effective as a way to get feedback to students. And then we'll have a few minutes for any final questions towards the end. So first off, Google actually doesn't, I mean, for all the great things that Google Classroom does, they actually don't have a lot of built-in audio and video, right? So it's like one of those missing pieces from it, but you can definitely still integrate tools into it. So what I'm going to do is highlight some of the core ones that I think are the most effective and easy to implement right within Google Classroom. The first one is, the why. Like, so this is going to take some time to learn the tools, to implement the tools. So why would you do audio and video? So first off, some students respond a lot better to verbal instructions and verbal feedback. And there's actually some studies coming out that even goes up to college students where if you just add some comments to a research paper versus adding an audio file or an audio point and they can hear you provide feedback, the students that hear the audio feedback are like exponentially more likely of revising their papers. It's kind of crazy to think about that, but it actually does have an impact. So that is going to be helpful for some students from a motivational standpoint and just a little bit more of a social aspect to the feedback. I mean, we've all had that situation where even thinking back, like you'd spend all this time writing the margins and the kids would just throw it in the recycling bin. The digital version of that is just they never check it once you return it. Adding the audio can be a little bit more of a factor there. The other thing is that, and I didn't put it in the slide here, sometimes I think teachers find it easier, right? It's easier to just kind of go and click the moat button, talk for about 10, 15 seconds and move on, as opposed to writing all these comments out for all the students. So there's a few different reasons why I think this might make more sense. So how do you do that? Now, there is no shortage of ed tech tools that do audio and video. I understand that. But what we try to do is narrow this down to 4 that we find the most effective and easy to integrate with Classroom. All of these, with the exception of WeVideo, are free. And actually at the conference on Monday, I was actually surprised by how many districts in Massachusetts have WeVideo subscriptions. So if you are a district that has it, or maybe you're not sure, it might be worth asking, but that may be an option for you too. And I'm going to go through each one of these and give a quick demo of it. So first, screencastify. And this is where if you have, say, some submissions of student work, it's particularly if it's a project, and instead of just doing a comment or a rubric, sometimes it's easier to just do a quick 1-minute video going through their work and submitting it. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have used Screencastify before. So it's really, the process is making sure it's installed, recording whatever feedback it is that you're giving to students, and then inserting it into their into Google Classroom or into the comments or one of those process. It doesn't really matter how you do it, but inserting that video from your drive, right? So Screencastify automatically saves to your drive. You can push it to them. If you, and I mean, I know this is a Google Classroom workshop, but you don't necessarily even have to use Google Classroom. Like if you make that Screencastify feedback video, you can just share it directly with the student from your drive, and then they'll get a notification and then they'll open it. The only drawback there is if a student's not checking their email and they don't see the notification, they may not know that they got it. So it's really whatever workflow you would like. But I know a lot of teachers, especially when we were doing a lot of the distance and hybrid learning, found that creating video feedback for projects particularly was more helpful. And I found that it was especially helpful in like visual and performing arts. So if you're a teacher of any of those subjects, or if you know any, it was a lot easier for them to maybe see a submission from a student and then either demonstrate something or show something visually. Because let's face it, a lot of things that we're teaching, it's not very conducive to just writing into a Google Doc or a form. You have to show it. So think about something that makes more sense to show them as far as feedback, and think about what you want to use Screencastify for. All right, so a couple instructional videos there if you want some tutorials on how to use it. I also made a quick tutorial if you want to check that out on how to share directly to Edpuzzle, because I know a lot of teachers use Edpuzzle for instructional videos assignments. So there is actually a way that you can push it directly to Google Classroom or to Edpuzzle. And if you really want to kind of go down the rabbit hole, you could go from Screencastify to Edpuzzle, make an Edpuzzle assignment, and then go from Edpuzzle to Google Classroom with your final product. All right, so just try to wrap your mind around that a little bit. It sounds complicated, but it's not that bad. It's just record your Screencastify, send it over to Edpuzzle. From Edpuzzle, make it an interactive video assignment, push it to Classroom, and you're done. Get a really nice assignment out of that. All right, next one is, I don't want that to play. There's me. All right, so the moat process. So what the heck is moat? So this came out of nowhere about a year, maybe a little more than a year ago, and teachers absolutely love it. So just about every school that I work with as part of our EdTechTeacher support has either used it, or as soon as I showed it, they were like, wow, where has this been all my life? So essentially what it does is it enables you to add audio feedback within Google Docs, Sheets, Slides, Google Classroom, and you could actually leave audio over the top of websites. I don't even know how that works as far as the technology side of it, but it does. I've actually tried it out a few times. So to do that, I'm actually going to do a really quick demo right within the slideshow I'm working off of. So say, for instance, this was an assignment that I was working with, and a student submitted this to me. If I wanted to say add some assignment instructions to this, or if they submitted it and I wanted to give them some feedback, I could actually add some moat commentary right within here. All right, so I'm going to click on the moat button, allow my mic. You'll only have to do all this stuff once, by the way. I'm 18, I read it. Yep. So you have to go through that process the first time. I'm not sure why maybe you go through on this account. Maybe it's because it's a new computer. And this is where it says record your moat. So I click this button. This is my first moat recording in this presentation. Now that it's done, I can get a quick preview of it. When I want to insert it, it's going to put it right on that slide. And then when it's on the slide, I can reposition it. I can play it. I can change the size of it. So right now it's kind of small, but if I wanted to change the format of it, I could change the color. I could add multiple moats to one assignment. If I'm teaching some older students and you have to worry about like student accounts and things like that, you can go in and have students create moats themselves. So maybe they provide some audio feedback or they work together through audio. So that's how you would do it on Google Slides. If you wanted to do it right within Google Classroom, I'll just show you quick how you do that. So I'm going to open up my demo classroom, and just about anywhere that you could add something, you're going to see the moat icon pop up. Right, so whether this is an assignment or an announcement, I just click on moat and do the same thing. I allow it. This is my moat commentary in Google Classroom. And there we go. So if I posted that, then it's going to give a direct embed. This is my moat commentary in Google Classroom. Right, so do you see how easy that is? Right, so it's not that complicated. So once you install it, and that's why so many teachers are starting to use this, is because you can really easily add in audio comments to Google Classroom announcements, feedback on assignments, really a lot of different use cases for something like moat. If you wanted to learn a little bit more about it, we added some resources here. There is a resource, how do I use moat with Google Classroom? It literally spells out all the steps for how you would add it in the different functionalities. You can see here that even in assignment grading, if you're using like rubrics and things like that, you can put it in there. So that is a link that you can check out. There's a moat learning hub that has sample assignments and templates that you can pull from. And then my colleague, Avra, talked a little bit about using moats as a comment bank. So what I mean by that is, actually she has a video here walking through it. You can create a series of almost like stock moat feedback points. So like if I always say like take and defend your position with evidence, I could actually make a moat of that, create a Google Doc with all of those audio clips, and then paste the link to that audio clip into the comments for students. So I actually wouldn't even need to re-record the audio over and over again. So a few different ways that you can think about streamlining the process. All right, so I know we're running a little bit short on time, so I'm just going to go through the next couple a little bit more quickly and then open it up for questions. So the next one here is Flipgrid. And the reason why we like to add this here is because, one, most people already know what Flipgrid is, so it's not necessarily a new tool. But thinking about using it for student feedback and having that as part of Google Classroom assignments is a really easy integration. So adding Flipgrids to Google Classrooms just with a click of the button. You can add Flipgrid shorts if you want. So if you haven't tried out the shorts there, we can add up to a 10-minute long video. Not that you'd want to necessarily add a 10-minute long video, but then you just share the link to them through Google Classroom. So you don't need a whole grid that people are adding to. If you just wanted to add some commentary or give some feedback, you could just use the Flipgrid platform and all of those creation tools within the Flipgrid video recorder and just add that link directly into Classroom. So a few other ways that you could use Flipgrid. The next one is WeVideo. And this is a very student-friendly video creation tool and teacher video creation tool, primarily because it works in Chrome. Right, so everything that WeVideo does is designed to work on either a Chromebook or through the Chrome browser on a MacBook or a PC, and it's collaborative, and it has a lot of stock library footage. So if you're interested in using WeVideo, I did put some WeVideo information on that slide there if you want to check that out. But essentially, it's a way that you can actually give feedback to students through video commentary, make it kind of like a back and forth through a track. This is a little bit more involved. Like you wouldn't be able to just get up and do this in then like 5 minutes. It takes a little bit of exploration of the tool. But for all the schools that have used it, it has been a powerful way to work video creation into the process. If your school already has a screencastify like Pro account, you may not need something like this, right? But if your school doesn't and you're looking for a video solution, I would say this is up there, right? So I would consider WeVideo as possibly an alternative to Screencastify, because you can actually screencast with WeVideo as well. And I would say if I were to put the two next to each other, WeVideo is probably a more robust platform. It's probably more pricey though. So that's the thing that you'd probably have to weigh as a school district. But it does have a nice integration with Google Classroom, as you can see down here. So that's another very viable option for any type of video feedback or even video submissions before you give the feedback. All right, so last thing here is just a couple updates, things that are coming soon. And a few of these things have been asked by teachers for a long time. So what are the features that are coming out? So first off, there's going to be add-ons. And a lot of these tools I'm sure you've heard of before. So Adobe Spark, Kahoot, iXL, Edpuzzle, Newsela, all of those tools are now going to have direct integrations with Google Classroom. So what the heck does that mean? So right now, all of those tools have an add to Google Classroom button. However, what this is going to do is it's actually going to have a module pop up that's going to open those apps within Google Classroom. So it's just going to give you a little bit more versatility on how you add things and assign things in the platform. So just a quick preview here. It's going to start with the ones on that screen. So it's going to start with those 9, but they are going to start integrating more after this like initial pilot phase. The second thing that teachers have been requesting forever is the ability to assign things to multiple classes at the same time. So what I mean by that is, say, for instance, you wanted to schedule an assignment in the future, you had to do that one at a time. One second. You had to do that one at a time for each individual class. But now, say, for instance, I have a research assignment coming up and I have 4 sections of a class. I can do that one assignment, have it post for each class at a different time. Right, so it's going to be like a drop down, almost like a rubric style approach. You can kind of see in the image there, and that I think it's starting to roll out soon. It may already be in your district, but it's going to, if it's not there yet, they definitely said it's going to be by the end of this this calendar year. So it should be coming soon. All right, so that brings us to the end of the session. I will pause after I stop the recording for any final questions. But I did want to let you know there is a session feedback form here. If you guys have any feedback for us, we would love to hear it, especially regarding future sessions and topics. I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you want to sign up for more workshops, the website I shared here also gets you there. So the bit.ly/ETTDESI. You could also just go to our EdTechTeacher website and navigate to it. We have an upcoming workshop on November 18th, and that one we're going to focus a little bit more on Google Forms and all of the ways that you can use that in the classroom. That's where we're going to focus a little bit more on the advanced features like branching forms and digital storytelling with forms and choose your own adventure and adaptive forms. So a lot of different Google Forms strategies we'll be sharing in that one. My colleague Avra will be running the elementary session. I'll be doing the secondary. So we'd love to see you at that or at one of our future workshops. So for the folks in the Zoom that want to stay for some Q&A, feel free to hang out for a few minutes. For everyone that's watching this on the archive, thanks for watching. Feel free to reach out to us at EdTechTeacher at any time, and best of luck with the rest of the school year.